No one visits this side of the shelter anymore. Not a soul. Not since they moved the newer dogs, the ones with perpetually wagging tails and eyes bright with the fresh promise of life. To the front hall. Back here, there is only a haunting silence. Dust settled thick like a blanket of forgotten memories, and a pervasive smell of age and decay. And in the farthest corner, under the flickering fluorescent light that hums like the tired heartbeat of something nearing its end, lies a German shepherd. His fur is like ashen eyes that once burned with the fire of fierce vitality. He doesn't bark, he doesn't stir. He simply lies there, waiting. People pass by their footsteps echoing in the emptiness, but he doesn't lift his head. He stopped, hoping a long, long time ago. He stopped believing that tomorrow would be any different from today. His gaze is fixed on the bare wall as if it is the only thing he can bear to see. The pain is too profound to confront any living creature. But today, something so strange it felt impossible began to unfold. A man walked in tall, wearing an old faded green hoodie and shoes that looked like they had trudged through countless roads, seen too many miles, and carried too many untold stories. His name is Elliot. He's 41, a mechanic from a small town in Oregon, a man who hasn't stepped foot inside a shelter since the accident 2 years prior ripped his life apart. He wasn't looking to adopt. He was just walking aimlessly, or perhaps more accurately running from a memory, too loud, too persistent to ever truly silence. As Elliot turned to leave, the heavy air suddenly shifted. He heard a soft rustle, a faint whimper, and then something he didn't just not expect, but couldn't fathom. The dog. This seemingly lifeless, utterly silent creature lifted his head. His ears, which had been flattened against his skull, twitched, and then his entire body began to tremble. Not out of fear, not in the slightest, but out of something else entirely. Recognition. Elliot froze mid-step. He turned back slowly, cautiously. Their eyes met across the dusty concrete floor, and in that singular shattering moment, everything from the past rushed forward like a tidal wave, a storm crashing through the brittle silence of years. But how could it be? How could a dog he believed was forever gone, lost to the cruel mountain pass be standing right here, trembling, staring back at him with eyes that once knew his voice, better than his own reflection? Elliot took a hesitant step forward. The dog flinched instinctively, a deep-seated response to past pain, then began to crawl slowly, almost painfully towards him. It was as if every inch of movement was a fierce, internal war between the fragile flicker of trust and the overwhelming weight of traumatic memory. And just before Elliot knelt down, tears welled up, blurring the image of the dog, because now he knew. He knew with a certainty that pierced through the grief. He knew exactly who this dog was. But how did they get separated? What horrific twist of fate tore them apart? And what happened to this once proud, vibrant companion who now hid in the shadows, a ghost of his former self? What in the name of everything lost happened to Bruno? This is a story many might find themselves feeling their own buried memories stirring. It's a stark, emotional reminder that moments of profound connection, of devastating loss and improbable reunion still happen, weaving invisible threads between souls across vast distances. If reading this makes you feel something real, a pang in your chest, a lump in your throat, perhaps it resonates with your own raw experiences, with your own unanswered questions, your own enduring hopes. 2 years ago, Elliot's life was whole, simple, anchored. He lived in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood in Bend, Oregon. His days unfolded predictably, working at the noisy garage, drinking coffee on the worn porch swing as the sun rose, and coming home to Bruno, a magnificent German shepherd he had raised from a clumsy, playful pup. Bruno was more than just loyal. He was fiercely protective, yet incredibly gentle, the kind of dog who didn't need a leash because his heart was tied irrevocably to yours. They went everywhere together. Rugged camping trips under starry skies, quiet fishing afternoons by the lake where Bruno would patiently wait by the bank, long meandering drives where Bruno would rest his massive head on the window pane. Eyes half closed, just soaking in the wind, like it carried the very essence of their shared memories. Elliot wasn't merely a dog owner. Bruno wasn't merely a dog. They were survivors of each other's deepest loneliness. Two souls bonded by shared grief and unwavering companionship. Elliot had lost his wife in a devastating fire 7 years ago. Grief became a silent, suffocating roommate until Bruno arrived, a furry, four-legged beacon of unconditional love that slowly, painstakingly coaxed him back to life. And then one brutal night, everything broke again. A storm hit the mountains harder, faster than anyone anticipated. Roads flooded, power lines went down, panic rippled through the small communities. Elliot had taken a wrong turn on a treacherous mountain pass, desperate to rush back home, a gnawing fear for Bruno gripping his heart. The truck swerved, tires lost grip on the slick, rain-lashed road, and tumbled violently down an embankment. When Elliot finally miraculously came to, bruised and disoriented, Bruno was gone. The passenger door had been flung open by the impact his paw prints lost instantly in the relentless downpour. Elliot searched for weeks that bled into months, every single day posting flyers with Bruno's smiling face, making frantic calls, visiting every dusty shelter within 100 miles, tears blurring his vision. He blamed himself relentlessly, every breath an accusation. Eventually, the sheer weight of the loss forced him into silence. He stopped talking about it, stopped searching, stopped allowing himself to hope. The pain was too immense to bear. Until today, until this impossible moment. And as Elliot stood there, his own body trembling, now staring at the dog who had once saved him from the suffocating darkness of grief, he realized with a jolt that Bruno had been carrying his own profound shadows too. This dog, once so proud, so alert, so bursting with life, was now broken in ways Elliot couldn't yet fully comprehend. Faint, almost invisible scars behind the ears spoke of past trauma, ribs just a little too visible. Hinted at hunger, a subtle limp in the back leg suggested injury and neglect. Life had taught Bruno a brutal lesson not to trust anyone who dared to get too close. And yet even now, even after everything he had endured, he had remembered his voice. Elliot knelt down slowly, the gravel biting into his knees, oblivious to the discomfort. "Bruno," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, barely audible above the buzzing light. The dog's ears twitched again, a tiny, fragile sign of responsiveness. But he didn't leap forward, didn't wag his tail with the wild abandon. Elliot remembered. He just stared, his eyes wide and searching, as if desperately trying to believe this wasn't another cruel dream that would vanish with the morning light. Elliot whispered again, his voice choked, "It's really me, buddy, I'm here." And for the first time in 2 agonizing years, Bruno took one tentative step forward, a single wobbly step towards the voice that had once meant everything, the voice that had always meant home. Sometimes healing doesn't happen quickly. Sometimes it takes years of slow, painful unfolding, and sometimes, just sometimes, all it takes is one familiar voice breaking through the silence. If you're reading this from anywhere in the world, stories like this happen everywhere to people, just like you. Just like us. If this moment made your heart ache just a little, if it reminded you of the incredible resilience of love, of the possibility of second chances, or of someone precious you miss with every fiber of your being, take a breath. It's a feeling shared by countless souls. The quiet, fierce belief that some connections, some beloved souls are still out there waiting. Perhaps this story can reach someone who needs to hear it. Someone who feels lost and alone. Maybe maybe it helps save one more Bruno from the shadows. And if you believe in stories infused with hope, in endings that bravely become new beginnings, stay with me, because what happens next will not just melt your heart, but reignite your faith. The shelter worker stood back, a silent, respectful witness, watching the raw, emotional scene unfold, as if she wasn't meant to be a part of it. Her name was Hannah. 29, soft-spoken with kind eyes. She was the only one on the staff who hadn't given up on Bruno, who hadn't believed he was just another lost cause, too damaged to save. She took a hesitant step closer, her voice barely a whisper. You know him." Elliot nodded slowly, his eyes still locked on Bruno, tears streaming unchecked down his face. "He's my dog." He choked out the words, heavy with years of pain and sudden overwhelming relief. "He's my family." Hannah's breath hitched. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then comprehension. "You're that guy," she breathed, "the one from the posters 2 winters ago. The German Shepherd." Elliot looked up surprised that his desperate, fading posters had reached this far. "Yeah. You saw those." She gave a sad, knowing smile. They were everywhere, all over the Tri-County rescue boards, shared online, tacked up in every vet clinic. We all looked for a while, but then silence. We thought you had given up hope. "I did," Elliot said softly, his voice cracking, barely audible. "Every day I just didn't want to admit it out loud, not even to myself." Bruno took another step forward, and then another, his body still trembling violently, a living testament to the internal struggle. It was as if every inch closer to Elliot was a fierce battle against every scar, both visible and invisible, he had earned on the streets in the wilderness, in the isolation. The physical bruises had faded, but the deep-seated terror and the fear of abandonment remained etched into his very being. Hannah knelt down slowly beside Elliot, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "He hasn't moved like this in months," she whispered, her voice full of wonder. "He wouldn't eat. When we walked in, he would just stare at the wall, utterly withdrawn. But now he's moving. Still. Slow, still cautious, every movement hesitant, but the way his ears lifted slightly, the way his paws inched forward across the cold floor. It was like watching something miraculous unfold, like watching a fragile flower bloom in the harshest winter, pushing through frozen ground towards the sun. Elliot reached a trembling hand into his jacket pocket. His fingers fumbled, gripping something worn and familiar. He pulled out a faded blue tennis ball, Bruno's absolute favorite, the kind with ingrained dirt teeth marks and the palpable weight of years of shared joy and memories. He placed it gently on the floor between them. "I kept it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "All this time, I don't know why. Maybe I just couldn't bear to let go completely." Bruno stopped, his gaze fixed on the ball, the worn object, a sudden powerful anchor to a life he thought was gone forever. And for a single breathtaking moment, the immense weight of survival, of fear, of 2 years of harsh reality seemed to lift from his shoulders. His tail twitched, barely perceptible. Just a single fragile movement, but it moved. Elliot's face crumpled, a watery smile breaking through his tears. "That's it, boy," he choked out. "You remember, oh God, you remember." The shepherd's eyes were glassy now, not just from memory, but from something deeper, something raw and overwhelming. Recognition, maybe, or the crushing weight of past grief finally released, or a love that had been forced to wait in the darkness for far too long. And then, a sudden desperate movement. Bruno lunged forward, not in fear this time, but with a raw, aching desperation that spoke volumes. He pressed his head against Elliot's chest, hard, clinging to him, like he was trying to melt into his very being, like he was trying to make absolutely sure this wasn't a cruel trick of light, a deceptive sound, or another agonizing dream that would fade when he woke. Elliot held him like he never wanted to let go, and in that moment, he knew he never would again. He buried his face in the shepherd's rough, dusty fur and cried, loud, messy, broken sobs that had been held captive for 2 long, desolate years finally breaking free. "I thought I lost you," he whispered over and over again, his body shaking with the force of his grief and relief. Bruno whimpered, in return, a low, guttural cry that sounded like 1,000 things at once, an apology for being gone. A profound relief at being found the culmination of every emotion a dog can feel, but cannot articulate in human words. Hannah had tears streaming down her face now, too. She didn't even try to hide them. "I think he waited for you," she said quietly, her voice full of a simple, profound certainty. "Some dogs, they just know. They know when someone is still looking for them, still holding on to hope, no matter how long it takes." Elliot pulled back slightly, his hands cupping Bruno's face, looking deep into those knowing eyes. We're going home, buddy, he said, his voice firm with renewed purpose. Together. But Hannah hesitated, a gentle reminder of reality. There's paperwork procedures we have to follow, she said softly. Legal things. Elliot nodded, understanding immediately. The practicalities could wait, but they would be handled. I'll do whatever it takes, he said, his gaze never leaving Bruno. Anything. He stood up slowly, and Bruno stood with him, still leaning heavily against Elliot's leg, unsure if this moment was truly real, but utterly unwilling to let go of the man who had just whispered his name. And as they slowly walked towards the front desk, a magnet attracting every eye. People stared. Volunteers stopped what they were doing, their faces a mixture of shock and awe. Phones were quietly pulled out to capture the impossible. Quiet gasps filled the room, not because the scene was overly dramatic, but because something deeply, profoundly healing was happening right there in real time. A man and his dog, two broken halves finding each other in the most unexpected, forgotten corner of the world, after time and tragedy had tried their absolute hardest to convince them it was over. They called it the miracle at Maple Ridge Shelter, but for Elliot, kneeling on that dusty floor, feeling the desperate weight of Bruno's head against his chest, it wasn't a miracle in the distant abstract sense. It was love. Love, fierce and unshaken, unyielding to the crushing weight of time, the cruel vastness of distance, or even the soul-destroying silence of 2 years apart. 3 days later, the adoption was finally officially finalized. Bruno was no longer case number 117, a forgotten statistic in a back kennel. He was Bruno McLeod again, son of the mountain trails, the campfire nights, and the kind of bone-deep loyalty that recognizes a voice across the chasm of years and pain. Elliot's house hadn't changed much in Bruno's absence. The same worn porch swing sat silent on the deck, the same ticking clock on the kitchen wall marked the passage of lonely hours. The same faded photo of his wife smiled from the mantelpiece. But something fundamental within Elliot had changed. He hadn't fully realized just how empty, how lifeless it had all become, until Bruno tentatively stepped inside and with his quiet presence began to breathe life back into every room, every memory. At first, Bruno was hesitant, unsure. He paced restlessly through the house, sniffing every corner, every piece of furniture, like he was walking through a fragile dream he feared would shatter. He stood by the back door for hours, some days gazing out but not quite ready to go outside, as if the world beyond that threshold had been cruel once, and he wasn't at all sure if it still would be. But Elliot waited. Every moment was filled with unwavering patience, gentle reassurance. He spoke softly, never raising his voice above a calm murmur. He even slept on the couch for the first few nights, just to be close, just so Bruno knew he was there, not going anywhere. Sometimes he'd wake in the quiet pre-dawn hours to find Bruno curled up beside him on the floor, nose tucked securely under his arm, a silent, fragile declaration of renewed trust. Then came the flashbacks, the echoes of trauma. Late one night, a sudden violent thunderstorm rolled across the sky, rattling the window panes. A normal summer storm for most people, perhaps even soothing, but not for Bruno. Elliot watched his heart aching as his friend, this once fearless, powerful shepherd, cowered under the kitchen table, his body shaking uncontrollably, eyes wide and wild with old terror. Elliot got down on the floor, his own body aching, and lay beside him close, but not crowding him, a silent anchor in the storm. "You're not out there anymore, buddy," he whispered, his voice steady and calm. "You're home now. You're safe." He stayed there on the hard floor until the last rumble of thunder faded into silence, and the rain softened to a whisper. Bruno didn't move from under the table, but he didn't try to run either. It was the first quiet, fragile sign that the long, slow process of healing had truly begun. One sunny afternoon, Elliot pulled out an old photo album. He flipped slowly through the worn pages, a journey back through years of shared memories. Muddy hiking trips, chaotic, Christmas mornings surrounded by wrapping paper, muddy paws tracking across pristine white bed sheets. Bruno lay next to him on the floor, his head resting heavily on Elliot's thigh. a familiar, comforting weight. There was one photo Elliot kept pausing on his fingers, tracing the edges. Bruno, 3 years younger, a blur of happy motion, chasing his wife Sarah through a field of towering sunflowers. She had her arms wide open, laughing, and the dog's tongue flopped out as he ran towards her tail. A propeller of pure joy, as if happiness was something you could literally taste. Elliot closed his eyes, a fresh wave of grief washing over him. He whispered to the dog, the words barely audible. "You were the last piece of her I had left, Bruno. The last tangible link." Bruno didn't move, but he let out a quiet, deep, tired sigh, a sound Elliot hadn't heard in years. The sound of a soul finally finding a space where it could feel safe enough to fully relax, to just be. Later that evening, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple behind the hills, Elliot took Bruno to their favorite trail, the one that wound along the banks of the quiet river. They hadn't walked it since the accident. Bruno hesitated at the trailhead, his body stiff, his old fear returning. But Elliot looked down, his gaze kind and understanding, and smiled gently. "We do it together this time, Bruno," he said softly, "step by step." And so, slowly, tentatively, they walked. The ancient trees whispered secrets in the evening breeze. The wind carried echoes of past adventures, and Bruno's tail, still cautious, began to rise, just slightly, a tiny pendulum of returning hope. When they reached the old wooden bench overlooking the peaceful water, the very spot where they had sat so many times before, Bruno sat down beside Elliot exactly the way he always used to. Quiet, present, a steady, comforting weight against his leg. And for the first time in 2 long, desolate years, Elliot let himself breathe fully, deeply. The weight of loss lifted, replaced by the quiet, profound reality of now. "I lost you once," he said, his voice raw but clear, looking out at the river. "But this time, Bruno, no matter what life throws at us, we finish the story. Together." Bruno turned his head slowly, and their eyes met in the fading light. This was more than just a reunion. It was redemption. Redemption for every day. Elliot thought he had failed him for every lonely, terrifying moment. Bruno felt abandoned for every second they both believed the story had already ended in tragedy on a rainy mountain pass. And in that quiet, sacred moment on the bench overlooking the river, they both understood something without needing a single word. Some souls, some connections are simply meant to find each other, destined to reunite, even if the world tries its absolute hardest to tear them apart, even if it takes years of painful separation. Even if the journey back is fraught with fear and hardship, they find each other because love, the real unwavering kind, doesn't forget. It doesn't give up. It waits. And when the moment finally impossibly comes, it comes home. Recovery, they both soon learned, didn't happen overnight. The deep, fierce love returned quickly, an instant, powerful current. But trust, that had to be painstakingly rebuilt, piece by fragile piece, like reconstructing a shattered mirror. Bruno had seen too much in his time away. Hunger gnawing at his belly, the biting cold of lonely nights, the fear of strange, sometimes unkind hands, the soul-crushing confinement of cages. He flinched instinctively at loud noises, slept with one eye open, vigilant and wary, and sometimes barked frantically at his own reflection in the dark of night, haunted by unseen demons. Elliot didn't push him. He understood, he knew intimately what it meant to carry invisible wounds, the kind that don't show on the surface, but leave the soul shattered inside. He knew what it felt like to look fine to the outside world, but be breaking apart internally. One crisp autumn morning, Elliot tried to take Bruno to the local park, just like old times. But as soon as they reached the familiar gate, Bruno froze. His body stiffened, his eyes wide with panic. He wouldn't step forward, wouldn't even sniff the inviting grass, his tail tucked in tight, his muscles rigid with fear. It was the leash, the same kind they had used to lead him from his kennel at the shelter, a trigger for his deepest anxieties. Elliot didn't say a word. He didn't pull or coax. He simply sat down right there on the cold sidewalk beside him, letting people walk past, letting time move slowly, letting Bruno decide. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, slowly, hesitantly, Bruno lowered himself and sat beside him. He didn't move, didn't look around, but he stayed. That was enough for today. A small, quiet victory. At home, Bruno started following Elliot from room to room, not in fear but with a quiet, constant attachment, like he needed to physically confirm this was real, that Elliot wouldn't disappear on him. Like everything else in his lost years. They fell into new, gentle routines, short, calming walks, slow meals where Elliot stayed nearby, soft music playing in the background, and long, comfortable silences that somehow spoke louder than any words could. Still, some days were harder than others. There were nights Bruno would wake up from a nightmare barking frantically, running to the front door, as if trying to escape something that wasn't there. A ghost from his past, Elliot would quietly find him, gently lay a hand on his head, and whisper, "It's okay now, buddy. You're safe. You're home." He kept the lights low, the house warm and comforting, and his words consistently kind, because love, the healing kind, doesn't rush the process. It just stays present, a steady, unwavering light in the darkness. One weekend, Hannah, the kind shelter worker who had witnessed their improbable reunion, came to visit. She brought a small gift, a simple hand-painted wooden sign. It read, "The dog came home." She smiled softly as she handed it to Elliot. "Not every story gets to end this way," she said, her eyes full of quiet emotion. "But yours gives people hope. Real hope." Elliot nodded, looking at the sign, a lump forming in his throat. "It gave me hope too, Hannah," he said softly. "More than you know." They hung it on the front door, a simple, profound reminder that even broken things, broken lives, broken hearts can be made whole again. Not perfectly, not quickly perhaps, not even in the way they were before, but honestly, through patience, through presence, through the kind of quiet, unwavering love that doesn't ask for anything in return, that simply is. And slowly, gradually, over weeks and months, Bruno's eyes softened. The guardedness lessened, replaced by a gentle light. His bark, once only used in fear, came back in happy greetings. His playfulness, buried for so long, returned in quiet, goofy bursts, chasing fallen leaves in the yard, stealing Elliot's socks, and hiding them under the couch, nudging him for attention. Each small moment was a victory. Each day, a step forward, not back to who they were, but bravely, tentatively towards who they were becoming together. 6 months later, a soft, silent blanket of snow covered Elliot's front porch, the same porch where he once sat alone, night after night, wondering if the best parts of his life were irrevocably behind him, lost forever. But this time Bruno lay beside him, a warm, comforting weight, his head resting contentedly on Elliot's foot, his eyes gently closing with the kind of deep peace you can't fake. The scars were still there on both of them, etched into Bruno's body, carved onto Elliot's heart, but they had transformed into something else entirely. Not just reminders of pain and loss, but undeniable proof of survival, of resilience, of love, enduring. Elliot watched the silent snowfall, a quiet smile spreading across his face. "You know, Bruno," he said, scratching gently behind Bruno's ears, a familiar ritual of comfort. "I used to think the story ended the day I lost you on that mountain." Bruno opened one eye for just a moment, as if listening intently. "But maybe—" Elliot continued, his voice full of wonder and newfound understanding. "Maybe that was just the beginning. The beginning of the next chapter. That winter was different. Bruno no longer hesitated at the door, no more flinching at shadows, no more pacing the hallways restlessly at night, haunted by his past. He had not only found safety again within the walls of their home, but more profoundly, he had found joy. He'd trot into the kitchen the moment he heard the comforting gurgle of the coffee maker. He'd nudge Elliot's arm every morning with his nose, a gentle, insistent signal, as if to say, "Hey, we've got another day, you and me. Let's use it." Elliot even started a small Instagram page. He called it Bruno Came Back. He didn't care about likes or followers. It wasn't for fame or validation. It was simply for sharing their quiet journey, for offering a beacon of hope, for reminding himself and anyone who stumbled upon it that loss doesn't mean gone forever, that broken things can still find ways to be beautiful again, that a second chance is sometimes just a voice, a touch, a moment of connection away. People from all over the world began to follow. Veterans struggling with their own trauma shelter volunteers who understood the Brunos of the world, people grieving their own profound losses, people tentatively starting their own journeys of healing. They shared their stories too. Dogs who waited years. People who never stopped searching, moments of reunion that felt like pure poetry. And in a world that can sometimes feel cold, harsh, and impossibly loud, Bruno's story became a quiet light, soft but steady, a testament to the enduring power of love. On the 2-year anniversary of their improbable reunion, Elliot took Bruno back to the shelter, not to drop him off, but to thank them from the bottom of his heart. He brought bags filled with high-quality biscuits, sturdy toys, and warm blankets for the dogs still waiting. He made a significant donation in Bruno's name, and as they walked through the rows of kennels, the familiar echoing space filled with the hopeful barks of the front dogs and the quiet despair of those in the back. Bruno stopped. He paused in front of one specific kennel and stared. Inside was a small, trembling pup, thin and frightened. His ears drooped, his eyes wide with the same kind of fear Bruno himself had once held. Elliot knelt down beside Bruno, following his gaze. "You thinking what I'm thinking, buddy?" he whispered. Bruno didn't bark. He simply wagged his tail, a gentle, certain swish against Elliot's leg. And just like that, the story. Their story opened a brand new chapter. Because once you've known what it feels like to be saved, truly saved from the darkness, you never ever forget how to save someone else. Some stories simply remind us how powerful love can be. But stories like this one, they don't just remind us. They ask us to act. Because right now, somewhere out there in a shelter, just like Maple Ridge in a forgotten back kennel, another dog like Bruno is waiting in silence, in fear, in a fragile, fading glimmer of hope. Maybe they've been forgotten by the world. Maybe they've stopped believing anyone is coming back for them. But you reading this right now, you can be their second chance. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to show up. Just like Elliot, broken and hesitant, but willing. Because sometimes the most life-changing, soul-saving thing you can give someone, furry or human, is simply your presence, your unwavering belief, your willingness to stay. So if this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something real and raw, please don't let it stop here. Share it. Let it echo into the lives of those who need to hear it. People who've known profound loss, people who are tentatively on their path to healing, people who are ready to believe in the impossible again. If you've ever loved fiercely and lost devastatingly, if you've ever found something precious you thought was gone forever, then you know what this means on a soul level. You understand intimately what second chances feel like. Let that feeling move you. Let it inspire you. Stories like this remind us that no matter where we are in the world, we are connected by the same raw pain and the same fierce, enduring hope. Thank you for taking the time to read Bruno and Elliot's story. And trust me, the world desperately needs more stories like yours.